Welcome to another edition of the RF Video Shoot Interview Series. It is a pleasure to be sitting here with none other than the Russian Nightmare, Nikita Koloff. Nikita, you've been everywhere in the wrestling business for the most part, and definitely would like to thank you for coming to our office.
Well, you know, it's a pleasure to be here, comrade. Right away, I'm sure I've shocked the people. They said, wait a minute, he's mastered the English language. Well, yes, I have, quite frankly.
One of our first questions we usually ask everybody is how you broke into the wrestling business.
Well, quite an interesting story. I think probably quite unique for most of the other people, or most of the other guys who've been in the business. You know, the old traditional way was, you either grew up in it as your father wrestled or someone in your family wrestled, or you were very close and very tight with somebody who wrestled in the wrestling business. It was a very closed-knit, closed group of people. And I broke in. I was actually training for a professional football tryout with the United States Football League. And I had a tryout lined up with the Tampa Bay Bandits. And so I'd spent about a year and a half in the gym working out at the particular time. And I was actually rehabilitating from a broken leg. I broke my leg my senior year playing football. And I got a phone call at 9 o'clock one morning. And it was from a guy by the name of Animal of the Road Warriors, who had become a good personal friend of mine. And actually, little known fact, I recruited him to the junior college where we were playing football. And that's where we first met. And he gave me a call that morning. He said, what do you think about wrestling? And my comment was, well, I think you guys are doing great. And he said, no. He said, what do you think about wrestling? I said, you mean like me getting in the ring and wrestling? He says, yeah. I said, well, let me think about it. And I said, what do I have to do? I guess what I thought was at the time, I thought, well, if they can do it, I can give it a shot. If it works out, great. If it doesn't work out, then I still got the tryout with the Tampa Bay Bandits. And my next question was, what do I have to do? And do they know that I've never been in the ring, never hit a ring rope, have absolutely zero experience? Oh, yeah. I told them all that. I said, okay, well, what do I have to do? He said, well, call this guy, Jim Crockett, down in Charlotte, North Carolina. And so I hung up the phone. I called Jim Crockett, and quite frankly, I told him right up front, I said, Mr. Crockett, I just want to tell you, I've never been in a ring, never hit a ring rope, and knowing his sense of humor now, I didn't know it at the time, but he was like, what are you talking about? They told me he had all kinds of experience, and I said, well, no, sir, I've had none. So it was interesting. He said, well, be in my office with your head shaved bald on June 4th. This was in 1984, and I thought, okay, well, so far so good. I can do that. I said, I'll see you there. And so I walked into his office that day, and I, again, I'd spent a year and a half in the gym, and I'd already spent several years working out anyway, but about 8 hours a day in the gym. So I was at physical peak performance. I was 285 pounds, 8% body fat, 34-inch waist, traps up past my ears, and walked in and introduced myself, and Jim Crockett took a look at me, took a second look, took a third take, and he said, take your shirt off. And took my shirt off, and I was there. And he said, wait right here. So he walked out and came in with Ivan Koloff and Don Kernoodle, who were the World Tag Team Champions at the time. And he said, take a look at your new partner. And they looked at me, and they looked at each other, and they looked at me, and they looked at each other. They're like, who's this guy, And they were cutting interviews, actually, at the time. And he said, here's the deal. Every time they walk out for an interview, you walk out behind them, cross your arms, and look at me. And I thought, so far, so good. I can do that, too. I can shake my head. I can look mean. Got that down pat. And so we cut interviews all afternoon. And then when we finished the interviews, they said, you'll wrestle tomorrow night. They had a big 4-hour television taping in Raleigh. In fact, it's kind of the who's who of wrestling was there. Dusty Rhodes, King Kong Bundy, just a bunch of guys were there. And I said, you'll wrestle, get to the town early, and the guys will work out with you a little bit, and you'll have a TV match. And so I'm walking in cold, Well, to finish the story, we got to the town late, so Crockett was not very happy. In fact, it was really hot. And Ivan went to him and said, we got in the ring. We were in the ring maybe 5 minutes. And we came, we got to get out of the ring, and Ivan went to Crockett. He wasn't going to let me wrestle, and he talked to me to let me wrestle. And Ivan came to me and said, whatever you do, Nikita, he said, don't trip on the ropes, get in the ring. Because apparently Crockett said if he trips on the ropes, he's history. He's out of here. And so that was the beginning of the story. I ended up having the match that night. It went about 13 seconds. It was at the time, a television record. They had never had a match that fast on television. And that was the beginning of the story.
Did you get trained by anybody?
Well, and then from there, what carried on was kind of on-the-job training, if you will. Ivan and Don and I would get to the towns a couple hours early for the next couple months, and we'd work out in the ring, and I'd have a single match that lasted about 15 seconds each night. And Ivan and Don would have the main event because they're the World Tag Champions, and Ivan would sit in my corner, I'd sit in Ivan's corner, and he'd watch my match, I'd watch their match, and then at the end of the night, in the car or wherever we were headed off to, we just talk. Ivan would critique what I was doing, or I'd ask questions. Why did you do this? So I began learning the psychology of the business very quickly.
So Ivan was pretty much your mentor.
Ivan was no question my mentor. Don Cornota was instrumental as well in my learning of the business. But Ivan, maybe a lot of people have asked you as I travel now, is he really your uncle? Well, no, he's not, but he should have been. He was as much an uncle to me as anybody had ever been, and really took me under his wing and really taught me the business, the old school business.
Were you a fan growing up watching wrestling, or?
I wasn't necessarily a major fan, growing up in Minneapolis, St. Paul, of course, home of the AWA and Vern Gagne. And interestingly enough, not a lot of people know, but Vern graduated from Robbinsdale High School, which is where I graduated from, of course, many years later. But I would flip through the channels and watch it a little bit here and there. Where I really began to gain some interest in it was when we started working out at Jesse Ventura's gym. He had a gym in Minneapolis called Ventura's Gym, and so we kind of hung around him, got to know him a little bit, and that was pretty cool at the time. I was in college, and so that was kind of a cool thing to do. And so I'd flip it on, and usually just to watch him. And then once he was off, so I really didn't have I wasn't an avid fan, I guess you'd say, growing up.
What were your first impressions of the road, as far as being around the boys and stuff like that?
Well, again, it was an interesting character that I developed because one of the things I did when I broke in, and the whole storyline was, I was Ivan's nephew just coming right off the boat, so I spoke no English, and as with anything I've ever done, I took it to 110th degree in that I decided that speaking no English, I wasn't going to speak any English anywhere. And so I didn't speak in the locker rooms. The only place I really spoke was in the car with Ivan. In fact, when I first got my apartment in Charlotte, Ivan took me around to the apartment, took me around to the phone company, to the power company, co-signed for everything. And everybody was told the same story. I spoke no English. And when I went to the gym, funny story, the first time I went to Gold's Gym in Charlotte, paid $25. They signed me up. And I'm working out, and I've condensed the story, but several months went by, and I got to know the manager a little bit. But even prior to that, though, the first day I was there, I should back up a second and say, the owner came in. He looked at me and he said, "Hey," he said, "I'm going to have to double your membership. You're too big to be working out in this gym." And I just looked at him and I just went, and walked away. And I could tell the expression of the guy's face. He's like, "Who's this jerk?" And I saw the manager run over to him and explain to him, "Oh, you don't know any English?" He's like, "Oh, okay." Well, several months went by. I'm talking like from June till October. And one day Roger, the manager, came in and he said, and it's funny why when you think somebody doesn't speak English, you think if you slow down the English language, they'll understand, right? He came up to me one day and he went, "Nikita, we need," and he's like, scratch his head, "How can I get there?" He said, "We need money, membership, money." Like that. This is exactly how he's talking to me, right? And I'm just totally in character. What happened is they've been watching the TV, watching me hang guys with chains and the whole thing. Nobody would talk to me. So they never asked for any more membership dues from that first $25 I paid in June. Awesome. Months went by, and so I just, I'm doing the puppy dog thing with Roger, don't understand. He's like, "Money, membership, money," and I'm like, I don't understand, right? I just walked away from him. Well, the next day, here comes Pete, right? And Pete, same thing. "Nikita, we need membership, money," right? And I'm just doing the same thing with Pete, just like the puppy dog. And I'm like, "Huh?" And he scratches his head. He's like, "How can I get through this?" He says, "Can you bring Ivan here tomorrow?" And I look at my wife, and of course, Now, remember, I said I took the business serious, and right, so I actually was studying Russian those first few months, and so Dyadia was Russian for uncle. So I said, Dyadia Ivan, and he went, yes, yes. He heard Ivan, right? Yes, can you bring him here tomorrow? And I brought $25 the next day, and paid it off, And so in the dressing rooms, in fact, a lot of people will remember we brought in a partner by the name of Crusher Khrushchev. And Crusher was actually an old high school mate, and I'll tell you about that in a second. That's an interesting story there, too. But Crusher told me he was in Louisiana at the time wrestling with Nikolai Volkov. And I had carried the character out so well, they said even in the territory, people were saying, hey, did you hear they got a shooting Russian up in the Carolinas? And then when he found out it was me, he said, I should have known that. Only you could have, because even back in our football days, even on the practice field, I was 110% in practice. So I broke into that business and I just gave it 110%. I took it to the fullest. And I really believe because I did, it really had a lot to do with how quickly I rose in the success of my wrestling career.
Did your family ever give you a hard time about the character? Or, maybe not even your family, but fans? Did you get heckled a lot, of course?
Well, yeah, I'll address the family first. It's interesting because my family, we didn't really, my father left when I was 2. I was raised, I grew up in the ghettos of the projects of Minneapolis, and so we didn't really have a close family. And my mom raised me, and when I told her I was going into professional wrestling, she really didn't know what to think. Okay, she didn't really have an opinion one way or another. My sister, although my mom, I found out later, she was very proud of what I had accomplished. My sister had 2 boys. My nephew, it was a big deal for my nephews. They could tell all their buddies at school, hey, that's my uncle, man. Nikita's my uncle. And of course, they didn't buy it, because everyone's believing, this guy's from Moscow, How can he be your uncle? So family was, that's where they were at. The wrestling fan, in that era, and again, because I lived it to the fullest, I didn't sign autographs, people come up, I would literally have fans or people really give me Russian English dictionaries for me to, this is a shoot, the name of the video, right? The shoot. They would give me Russian English dictionaries. They wanted me so bad to speak English, right? And I remember Charleston, South Carolina one time, Crockett's office got a death threat that if Ivan and Nikita showed up at the building that they were going to kill us. And when we go to Fayetteville, North Carolina, it was a military town. And Ivan would get on the interviews and he said, oh, I want all you soldier boys in your yellow dresses. I want to see you in the front row. Of course, they hated that, right? So we get to Fayetteville and they wanted to kill us. So we had a lot of heat from the wrestling fans, and especially since I carried the character to its fullest, wouldn't sign out, they look at me and they want an autograph. I just look at them, just give them a growl, a snare, or a glare. And of course, they just hated that even worse.
How were you treated by the veterans besides Ivan?
Overall, the majority of them were very receptive to it. As with anything, there was animosity and jealousy from some of the ones in the business. Not so much the veterans per se, or let's say the marquee name, the players in the business, as much as maybe some of the aspiring superstars of wrestling who had, in their eyes, paid their dues 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years and maybe either never really got a break or were trying to get their break, and here this punk kid walks in and he goes right to the top in a matter of months. And Ivan always said to me, and again through his mentoring, said, don't let it bother you, don't worry about it. 1, it's the nature of the business. 2, you paid your dues in other ways. Maybe you didn't go to wrestling school. Maybe you didn't, sweat the sweat, blood, and tears, in the podunk Iowa towns of America, Timbuktu towns. But you paid your dues in other ways, and because of that sweat and blood and tears you put in the gym, you were in the right place at the right time.
I guess one of your first programs was with the Road Warriors. You and Ivan against the Road Warriors. What were some of your impressions? What did you think of them at first when you worked with them?
Strong guys. Sure, really saying, supernatural strength in a sense. I don't think Animal knew his own strength. great guys to work with, really. Just a natural. There was that aura between the Road Warriors. Of course, they had built a tremendous career of their own, even at an early time in their career. And for Ivan and I to come in and with the whole Russian thing, that was a natural for the fans to go with the Road Warriors against the Russians. And we had some phenomenal matches together. I was very thrilled. A funny story one time, they had, they were infamous for their press slams. And yet in all the matches we had, they had never press slammed me. Of course, they used to do reps with Ivan, And Animal caught me off guard one night. Yeah, and he caught me off guard, and he press slammed me. And I said, okay. I said, I said, we're going to really show them how strong you are. And there's no hands on the shoulders, man. I became an airplane, I just put the arms out there. I said, okay, let's show them what you can really do. Well, he slammed me, and it was all said and done. Dressing room after, I said, never again. You got me one time, never again will you get me. And that was it. That was the one time that he got the press slam in.
How was Jim Crockett as a boss?
I enjoyed working for Jim Crockett. I had a great rapport with Jim. I guess because of my rise and my success and the ability to draw a crowd, of course, made him lots of money. So that always helps. Jim Crockett at one point in the wrestling career had brought into the company private planes, and we were flying around on private planes. And I guess one of the most flattering things I'd ever heard was the pilots had shared with me. They said they'd be handed a list of who'd be on the planes. And they said, here's the deal. If any one of these four guys, and the four guys were Magnum, Dusty, Flair, and myself, if those four guys aren't here, the plane waits, no matter how long they have to wait till they get here. Anybody else, when it's time to leave, the plane leaves. They miss it, they miss it. And I guess that spoke loudly for the relationship I think Jim and I had. And not a lot of people really understood Jim. He had real, kind of, I guess what I'd say, a dry sense of humor. Did I agree with 100% of everything he did? No, I wouldn't necessarily say that, but he treated me well, especially up to the point in time where I took a break. I took a hiatus from the business. So I had tremendous rapport. I remember a time when Jim and I and Dusty and Barry Windham jumped on the private plane after some matches in Ontario and flew down to the Big Apple in New York and limousine waiting, and we toured the Big Apple the whole entire night, in and out of food joints and clubs and all kinds of things. But that was the kind of relationship I had with Jim.
How about Dusty Rhodes? Did you get along with him as booker and as a friend?
I did. In fact, I think I would say, and I would think Dusty would probably go on record and say that I was one of the few who he allowed to really get close to him. I developed a great rapport with Dusty when we did the whole turn and we became the Superpowers. We spent about a good year and a half on the road together, traveling up and down the road, just him and I, and riding in his red Mercedes. And in fact, one of the things I try to establish with people in the business is I would try to establish respect from them. A lot of the guys would, of course, it created animosity, and that's a whole other story about that whole turn. But even though he was the booker, I was never one to kiss somebody's tail. I just kind of said what I said and how I felt, and even with Dusty, I can remember there were times when we'd schedule a time to meet together, to head to a town, and this was never necessarily intentional, but maybe we're going to meet at 5 o'clock, and 5:20 I'd roll in, and there he'd be sitting in his red Mercedes. Most people would have been there 20 minutes to 5, waiting on Dusty. And the real kicker to all of it is, I'd let him drive. Most of the other guys would drive him to the town. And most of the time we took his Mercedes. I had a convertible Corvette. Occasionally I would take that, but I'd say he drove more than I did. So Dusty, when you watch this, nothing intentional. That was just that good relationship we had with one another. That I knew I could do that because I had a special kind of a bond with Dusty. He used to say, Nikita, I've got this bond, baby. Yeah. Nikita, my man. Yeah. I've got this bond. Superpowers, baby. Yeah. And we really did. We really had a bond, and I gelled well with him, and we did a lot of things, family things, personal things together. outside of the wrestling business. And to this day, we keep in touch and contact with one another.
At the time, Dusty was booking some big shows. He came up, I guess, with the concept of Great American Bash, him and Jim Crockett. Were you overwhelmed by that as far as going to these big stadium shows and thousands of people?
Yeah, I'd have to say it was. In fact, you got to remember the very first one, 1985, the big push was with myself and Ric Flair, and we had never even stepped in the ring. We really only did one small angle. We did a dungeon scene that was the build-up to that match. And 30-something thousand people in the Coliseum there in the outdoor stadium in Charlotte was, I'd have to say, was extremely flattering and overwhelming would be a good word. Main event, only 13 months into the business, standing in front of 30-something thousand people. And I played football in college and not any major crowds like that, but it was tremendously overwhelming.
What are your memories of that match?
I remember Flair flying in on that helicopter. I remember the people jumping in the ring, the drunks jumping in the ring, attacking me, which was, again, just kind of speaks of how well the character got over. I mean, they were that serious that they, came in. And in fact, it was kind of funny that, the cops, and it's still on the video, I believe, on the 1985 Great American Bash video. The cops, at first, they thought it was just part of the deal. And they're watching this take place. Finally, they figured it out. So on the video, you see the cops roll in. They snatch them guys and get them off. And at first, it was strange because I'm thinking, somebody's got me in a waistlock. I'm thinking, well, Uncle Ivan's on the floor. Flair's laying down, selling. Certainly, this is not David Crockett, the referee. Who can this be? And then it finally dawned on me that it was the fans, and then the cops snatch them off, and then the match continued. I guess those are some of the memories. The fact that it was my very first match against Rick, and the master of the business that he is, and how well he brought me along in the business. That was just the starting point of what would become many, many great matches in the years to come.
I remember one of the great angles was, I think it was before the Flair match, was you and David Crockett. When David Crockett was, interviewing you and Ivan and Crusher, and he would constantly nag you. Basically, He said you guys cheated. What are your memories of that angle?
Of course, that tied in with him, why he was special referee for the heavyweight match. And the story there was, of course, David and Rick were good friends. So it was kind of a natural. And when they came to me and said, here's what we'd like to do, David didn't set well with a whole lot of people. And in fact, when that happened, I guess a lot of the boys in the dressing room really popped on it because nobody knew it was going to happen. And they said, man, was that a shoot? They thought I was really hot at him, I just, again, like everything I've ever done, I put 110% in. So when they saw the flats of his shoes and he was supine to the ceiling, they thought I broke his neck. Really, it really led to a tremendous part in building up to that 30-something thousand people in that stadium on that particular night.
Right. When we did our interview with Dusty Rhodes, we talked with Dusty about your matches with Magnum, and he said there was sort of a professional rivalry between you and Magnum. Was that a shoot, or is there a story behind it?
Well, it was just, I guess, the story is, the Russian Nightmare against the All-American Boy. And I didn't know Magnum real well when the angle started, and I kept pretty much to myself anyway in the business, as many would attest to. And so it was very much on just a professional level. A lot of guys, a lot of people ask, a lot of fans say, "Oh, you're all buddies," and this and the other. Well, some are, some aren't. And I didn't really buddy up with anybody. I didn't butt my nose into anybody's business. When I broke into the wrestling business and I made that decision to give it 110%, I also said I'm going to treat it like a business. It wasn't an ego thing for me. It wasn't like I was going to get on the phone and call my buddy and say, "Hey, watch me on TV. I'm going to be on WTBS, man, Channel 17. It wasn't about that for me at all. It was a business. I treated it as a business. And so every match I entered into, every angle I entered into, I took it fully as part of the business. And so with Magnum, it was on a very business level. In fact, I've done a number of radio call-in shows, and we'll take calls from the fans. And just recently, a fan was telling me. And one of the things I hear the most of are the Magnum series, the best of 7 series with Magnum, and the realism of them. And man, you guys hit each other. You know, you did, and it was just it just became a natural. It was a natural angle. The people loved him, the people hated me, and so there was just a chemistry there between the two of us that just flowed, and because it did, it just got over just tremendously strong.
What are your memories of some of the matches with Magnum, as far as the best of the 7?
I think the whole storyline, you know, the going up 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, and the people, how behind Magnum the people were, you know, how much they loved him. And when he won that first one, you know, because you know they weren't sure. It was so I had become such an overpowering force. They weren't sure he could even win a match when it became 3-0. And when he won that first one, man, the people just went ballistic, and there is hope, you know. And so each match as it built, I guess what I remember is the level of excitement in the buildings as we would come to the next match, and we would build it on television, and just the electricity in the building. So when he went 3-2, he won that second one, man, just the excitement level intensified, and then it went 3-3, and the people couldn't believe it. You know, boy, this is the comeback. And understand too, you know, never before, to my knowledge, prior to that, had wrestling ever seen any kind of best of 7 series like that. You know, 2 out of 3 falls, this and the other. And so when it came down to that 7th and final match, the tension was immense in the Charlotte Coliseum that night, and it couldn't have played out any better with the use of the chain. And as many would remember from the video, when we used that chain, and the chain just like a snake just slinked out of the ring, so that the referee couldn't. That was totally unplanned, but it couldn't have been any better planned. And the way they captured it on video, which is totally unplanned, but again, it couldn't have been any better planned. Best of 7 series, without a doubt, are some of the most memorable moments with my matches with Magnum.
Right. Who are some of your other favorite opponents? You guys worked a lot with Rock and Roll Express.
Rock and Roll Express, and we had some tremendous matches with them. I really enjoyed working with those guys. Ricky Morton was a phenomenal worker in the business, and you know, could and would do anything you asked of him. And all these guys were instrumental too in the building of my career because of their professionalism, because the fact that they were veterans in the business. You know, the match is only as good as your opponent makes it, and because of their professionalism, you know, we had some tremendous matches with one another. The people, I'll never forget a time years later. One of the guys who was then in the business came to me and said, you know, I was just a fan in Greensboro on the Starcade, man. It was you and Ivan against the Rock and Roll Express, and we were in the cage, and man, you shoved Ricky Morton over the top of the cage out to the floor, and he was bleeding profusely, and I was in the stands with my girlfriend, man, and I bailed out of my seat, and I ran down. He said, I literally jumped over the barrier. I'm like, Ricky, you got to get up, man. You got to get, they're killing Robert in the ring. They're killing him. And he said, the cops snatched me, man, and it took me, they were going to throw me out of the building, and my girlfriend looked at me and said, well, are you crazy? What are you doing, man? But you know, I think about those kind of matches, and you know, what we had, the level of participation, even from the fan support, were just incredible. Some of the other memorable matches would have been with Nature Boy, of course, Ric Flair. I don't know that I could even isolate any one particular match with any of the guys. You know, I'd have to say the Rock and Roll Express, the Road Warriors, Ric Flair. Some of the matches, of course, the Great American Bash, that first one, the match with Ric Flair. I had some great matches with Lex Luger. I had some great matches with Ravishing Rick Rude. There were a lot of guys. Those probably stand out the most.
Right. At the time of NWA, you guys did a couple shots, I guess, for Bill Watts, with the angle with the, I guess it was Sting and Ultimate Warrior as they blocked the ring and the Russians attacked Bill Watts. What were your initial impressions of Bill Watts? Because he later became sort of your boss.
Yes, I could. You know, the first thing that comes to mind is I thought as I was in the dressing rooms and hear him relating to the other guys in the business and whatnot. I thought, geez, I don't know I could ever work for this guy. That's why you never say never, right? I thought to myself, man, boy, if you ever talk to me the way you talk to some of these guys, you know, whew, I don't know, man. That was an initial impression, really. I thought to myself, I don't know that I could ever work for this guy.
How do you compare his locker room compared to the NWA?
There was a different, I guess I'd say, intensity in his dressing room, more of an edginess in those dressing rooms as compared to the NWA. There was quite a bit of more camaraderie in the dressing rooms. Everyone, not that the guys down there weren't working together or anything like that. I think just because of his demeanor and how he carried himself, there was just an edginess in their dressing room, different from the NWA.
At the time, I guess it was like late 86, 85, when I guess Vince was buying a lot of talent and stuff like that. Did the World Wrestling Federation ever put fillers out?
No, not particularly. The closest I probably ever came to considering the WWF was when Crusher Khrushchev had made the decision he was going to leave the NWA and he was going to go up there, and they were came up with the idea of demolition. And Crush had wanted me to go and be his partner as Demolition. And I told him, I said, you know, Crush, I said, I've worked hard and I've given a lot of effort into building Nikita Koloff, and to just go and give up that entire character and become a totally new character, and you know, I can't do that. I just and I felt in one sense I did feel a sense of loyalty to Jim Crockett for giving me a break into the business and treating me as well as he did and taking care of me. And of course, you know, Crush went on to beat Demolition and got Bill Eadie as his partner instead of myself. But that was probably the closest I came to entertaining any idea of working in New York. The only other time I would say is when the magazines were really pushing, you know, what would happen if Hulk Hogan wrestled Nikita Koloff, and so they really were trying to push that angle, and so we get a lot of feedback from the fans from that, and that was about it.
Were you watching their product at all at the time?
Yeah, I did,
right.
And truthfully, I always felt it was you know, a tad cartoonish, if you will. Although I was nothing short of impressed by McMahon's genius in terms of marketing, and I, you know, if hindsight's 20/20, looking back, boy, had I made the decision to go there, it may or may not have catapulted my career to a whole nother level. If you would have even considered bringing the Russian Nightmare, Nikita Koloff, and you know, back then in those days, it was like neither federation ever existed. And so there was never even a mention of another individual, or if somebody did go there, their character did change, which is probably what kept me from even pursuing the idea of even going there, because of the hard work I put into developing Nikita Koloff.
Right. I guess your Magnum TA then got into a car accident, correct?
Yeah, a major accident, of which I was totally unaware of because I was in Japan on a tour in Japan at the time.
Right. And then I guess it was Dusty Rhodes' decision to turn you babyface.
Well, what happened is I came back from Japan, and actually my first night back was in Philadelphia.
Right.
Flew right from Japan to Philadelphia, and brought me up into a small room, Jim Crockett and Dusty, and sat me down and said, I guess you've heard. And I said, heard what? And he said, you know, Magnum was in a serious car accident and broke his neck, and it looks like he's going to be a quadriplegic. And I thought they were ribbing me, and I thought, you're kidding, right? And they said, no. They said, it's true. And so once they convinced me of that, and they said, that leaves us with a problem. I thought, well, you know, and up to that point, you know, Magnum and I had kind of been nemesis at that point in time. And Magnum was teaming with Dusty at the time in a lot of matches against the Four Horsemen. And he said, I said, well, what's up? He said, well, about 3 weeks from now, we've got a huge cage match in Charlotte that we've really been building Magnum and Dusty against two of the Four Horsemen. And that kind of leaves a void there. And we've got an idea. And I said, well, what's the idea? And they said, well, we're thinking about teaming up Dusty with you as his partner. You know, and I'm like, wait a minute here. Russian Nightmare American dream. Kind of a contradiction of terms there, isn't it? And and I'm still only about 2 years into the business, so I'm really a neophyte in a sense. And I'm thinking to myself, well, Crockett's been around the business his whole entire life. Dusty's been a master of the business. Who am I to say, and so they're at, what do you think? And I'm like, hey, I guess if you think it'll work, then, I guess let's give it, and we can give it a shot. And I talked to Dusty a little bit more about it at length and get his feelings on it. Do you think it'll work? And once we concluded the conversation, the consensus was they really felt strongly that it would, nothing like that ever been done before, turn a Russian guy, babyface, and said, we really believe it will. So we said, let's do it. In fact, it was probably the best kept secret in wrestling. I know today's day and time, this could never happen. Too much exposure now. But the only guys who knew, once we made the decision to do it, the only guys that knew were myself, Dusty, and Jim Crockett. That's it. Not another person knew. It was the best kept secret, I think, in wrestling.
Were you nervous going into that match?
In a sense, I suppose. In fact, and again, what we did was we said, get to the building. Matches started at 8 o'clock. I didn't get there till 9 o'clock, so we knew everyone would pretty much be in the building. All the boys would be in their dressing rooms. Put a towel over my head. I wasn't even booked to be on the card that night. Walked in the building with a towel over my head. It was interesting when I walked into the babyface dressing room. The guys are kind of like, "You're in the wrong dressing room." I'm like, "No, I'm not," because they're in two different ends of the building, right? And I'm like, "No, I'm in the right one." They're like, "No, you're not." Like, "Yes, I am." "No, you're not." And because what's going through, you got to understand what's going through their mind is everyone's thinking, "Okay, I'm the mystery partner. They just haven't told me yet."
Right.
See, that's what all the other guys are thinking in the babyface dressing room. Never could they have fathomed that the Russian Nightmare would have been Dusty's partner. So you want to talk about jealousy and animosity. From number one, breaking the business, having never been hit a wrestling rope, and now 2 months in, 2 years into the business, all of a sudden I'm the Booker's new partner. And there was. Yeah, you could have cut the air. The expression. The air's thick enough to cut it with a knife. Yeah, you probably could have that night. And I walked into so once that got settled, and when Jim Crockett walked in and said, "Oh, Nicky, how you doing?" Then the light kind of came on. The guys kind of knew, oh, now we know why he's here. And so in one sense, I guess there was some nervousness to the fact that I've of course been booed up to that time, and like I said, death threats and everything else. And so I'm looking at it with trying to keep an open mind on it, and more than nervousness, I guess excitement as to see what was going to happen with it.
The crowd went crazy too.
They're
quiet at first because they were shocked.
Yeah, it was. In fact, I think back on that night, if I had to pick one particular time in my career overall, I'd say that night was probably one of the most awesome, astounding nights for me personally, really in my lifetime. Because the way we set it up, of course, was, Dusty his music would come up. The other guys were already in the cage. His music would come up, and he'd head out through the curtain to the ring, and I'd wait about, 10, 15 seconds, and then I'd come out behind him. And of course, there was a pop from the people when he came through the curtain. And then the minute I came through the curtain out of that babyface dressing room, like you said, it was just a lull, really just a hush. I mean, as was said, you could have heard a pin drop then. The people just didn't know what to think. Was I hired to attack him from behind and jump him or what? And as I trailed him all the way down to the ring, let him get in the cage, and Ole and J.J. Dillon jumped on him, and I stepped over the barricade and just paused and and looked out among the people, and just even building the anticipation greater. Then stepped up onto the doorway and paused again, and just looked around and then finally stepped through the ropes, and I paused one more time, a third time, before finally Ole Anderson turned and looked at me and started walking towards me. And when I tore into him, the old expression, the roof came off the building, the place just erupted. And we got the 1, 2, 3, kicked Ole out of the ring, and then JJ bleeding and laying defeated. And it was unbelievable, really. I mean, 11,000 plus people for 15 minutes chanting, Nikita, 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 and guys taking off their shirts and doing the most, the most muscular all throughout the crowd. It was astounding to see that type of thing, that transition of where they could go from wanting to kill me to in an instant just going ballistic and just being thrilled that I would help Dusty out.
Right. Did you change your character as far as being on the road, like with fans?
I did. I realized I needed to make the transition there now where I would start signing autographs and start being that good guy to people, and which was a change because up to that point I wasn't joking when I said it was natural for me to look mean because I was pretty stone cold. No Steve Austin intended. I was pretty stone cold as far as so the gimmick was just a natural for me. And so that was a transition for me to now start, in a sense, kissing babies and signing autographs. In the ring, I maintained, of course, basically the same style for the most part. But outside of the ring, it didn't take me long to realize that as the fan adulation and the fan following grew, that these were the people putting the bread on the table, and that I would want to do accommodate them as best I could as a fan.
You talked a little bit about the Horsemen. Did you see the Horsemen? Basically, the whole, I guess, gimmick of the Horsemen. Did you see it taken off? Did you see it was going to go as good as it went?
See it evolve? Yeah. And it was a great idea, and as it really started coming to pass, I was thrilled to see it happen. Of course, because for one thing, when Dusty and I teamed up as the Superpowers, we had quite a few matches, quite a few 8-man matches with the Superpowers and the Road Warriors against the Four Horsemen. In fact, a memorable match there would have been in Landover, Maryland. The first time we went into one of the first times into that part of Vince's territory, and it was around the July 4th era or time frame, and I don't think anybody thought we were going to draw just coming in for the very first time the NWA and with the holidays. But we put 23,000 plus people in that building that night, and we had a cage match against them guys, and I tell you, the people were, for 23 minutes were on their feet. They never sat down. And again, how strong the angle got over. They were chanting Nikita, Nikita for the entire time till I finally got in the ring. We milked it and milked it and milked it for 10, 15 minutes before I ever even got in the ring. And when I finally got that tag, boy, the place just erupted, and the Horsemen, with as well as that angle got over, they really carried it to a new level. Right.
Which Horseman did you like to work with the best? Tully, Arn?
Well, I have memorable matches really against all of them. I enjoyed tremendously working with Arn Anderson, with Tully Blanchard, Luger when he was one of the Horsemen. Probably one of the most difficult guys to work with was Ole Anderson, but that's only because that's Ole. And hey, Ole, I like you, man. And then of course Flair. I mean, whether it was a single, a tag, a 6-man, or an 8-man, I don't think we had a bad match that I can remember, no matter who it was against. So I enjoyed working with all of them.
Right. Around the time the World Wrestling Federation was gaining popularity, Vince was eating up all the small territories and stuff like that. What was the vibe in the locker room as far as maybe catching up or you guys were basically head to head. Vince was number 1 and Crockett was number 2. Was there ever a sense of becoming number 1?
Yeah, and and there were times when we were on the verge of doing that. I know there was a breaking point at one time for Vince where there was, like, as he has told the story, it was all or nothing. I got to put all of it into this, and hopefully it's going to take off for me. When we went into some of his markets the first time, like Philadelphia, like Landover, like Baltimore, Boston, they weren't used to our type of wrestling, and we always said we're wrestling, we're different, and they weren't used to that. And I can remember in Philadelphia. I can remember, the fans, we'd be out there wrestling 20, 30. Flair, I'd wrestle 45 minutes was about my average match with Ric Flair. And 2-hour television show, you don't see 34 minutes from what I understand now. That's with all the matches. But I wrestled 45 minutes. I can remember the people saying, chanting boring, boring, boring. But, within about 6 or 7 months of conditioning them to our style of wrestling, we'd be in town the same night in Philadelphia that Vince was.
Yeah.
They'd have 10,000 people over at their building. We'd have 10,000 over at our building, and the people just started really understanding our psychology of our business and really buying into it. And so it was really, the dressing room attitude was, we can do this. We can build up to 10,000 people. When we first went to Philly, it might have been 1,000, but within months we built up to 10,000. And so we knew we could do it. We knew we could compete because we had a product that was different, and we believed in ourselves, and we proved that.
What do you think happened to Jim Crockett's promotion as far as, eventually sold it to Ted Turner, and Turner took over? What do you think led to the downfall? Was it that a lot of people we interviewed said that he spent a lot of money on expenses as far as like the plane, the jet, and,
That seems to be the general consensus. I think what happened, a couple things. The Crockett Promotions was a mom and pop organization, and they did tremendously well over the years. They thrived over the years, and the expense. They bought the 2 planes, they bought the jet, they bought the Gulfstream. Was not a bad idea at all. In fact, I loved it, man. I was home every night. Matches were over on the private plane and back home. It was fantastic as opposed to driving 2,500 miles a week. Where it started getting a little carried away was when we'd fly from Charlotte to Columbia, which was a 90-mile drive, or Charlotte to Greenville, South Carolina, which was about a 110-mile drive, or Charlotte to Fayetteville. And so it started getting a little extreme. Now, did I complain? Well, no, I was on the plane. But that in combination with what I would say would be the bookkeeping, because the way I understand it is, it wasn't until about 7 or 8 months into the indebtedness that the red flag really went up and said, hey, we're several millions into debt here. And, you can point the finger. You can point the finger and say, well, it was the CPA. He should have known. He should have hired a more versed CPA. Well, you can point the finger at a lot of people, but the fact of the matter is it did happen. There was probably some unnecessary spending that took place without really realizing that it was happening.
Right. I guess at the time, a lot of guys like Tully and Narn eventually went over to Vince when the changeover happened. There was cutbacks on people's contracts and stuff like that. Did you feel threatened at any time?
No, not really. And there was what happened. Of course, there was a transition with me in there when all of that was happening, and many know the story because it was written up in the wrestling magazines. I had a wife that died of cancer, and so I walked away from the business to take care of my wife. There are many different opinions on that. Some thought I should have been loyal to the wrestling business, and why wasn't wrestling first? And so there's opinions both ways. But I just felt in my heart that family was first, and I needed to take care of a dying wife. And so that was all in that same transition when Turner was starting to buy it. The company, and I went to the corporate guys and I explained to them the situation. Said, I'm not saying I won't ever be back, but this is something that I have to do. And so, you could tell the face of it was going to change though when it went from a mom and pop company to now corporate America stepping in to own it.
Right. Before that time, Jim Crockett bought some of the UWF. Well, Bill Watts basically sold his promotion over to
right.
Jim Crockett. When those guys came in, I've asked a lot of guys this. Do you think Crockett missed a boat as far as doing an inter-promotional angle with the UWF guys? Instead, he basically buried a lot of the guys.
Yeah, and I don't know. Of course, I can't speak for Jim and knowing what his thinking was there. And I always said I didn't know why he was buying it to begin with. Like Vince would go into a territory and start running shows. I thought, why shell out the money to buy it? I mean, I guess he just felt it was the right thing to do, just like he did the same thing in St. Louis with that market. He purchased the territory. And in one sense, I respect him for doing that. I think he had respect for the old promoters who used to own those, like Bill Watts and the guys who used to own the territories. Why he did that, I don't know if that was just Jim's way of saying, look, I'm running the show here or what.
Right. What are your memories of your matches with Terry Taylor? I guess he was one of the first guys that you worked the program with when those guys came over.
Yeah, we had some great matches together. I enjoyed working with Terry. one of the most memorable that a lot of people still talk about now, and even when I go out and I speak in different venues, I still have actually the old UWF World Television title belt where we had the unification match in Chicago for Starrcade '87, and it's interesting how that belt comes back into play years later. And I joke with people, I say, they never asked for it back, so I kept it. And but we had some really great matches together, and Terry was a great worker. And again, all these guys that I wrestled were tremendous in helping build my career, because without them, Nikita Koloff wouldn't have had the career he had.
Right. A lot of people knock Lex Luger as far as a worker. They say, he might be in the business just to make money off the business. He's not a true student of the game, so to speak. What are your views on Lex Luger as far as a worker, and what are your memories of your matches with him at Starrcade?
First thing I think about Lex, I think about that thumb. Lex, I still to this day can't figure out.
Actually, it was the bash.
The bash. I still to this day can't figure out why you throw a punch with that. Why you can't pull that thumb in, Lex? I never figured that one out, man. What the deal is there? I had a great relationship with Lex. Up and down the road together, him and I. I was probably one of the few who had a great relationship with Lex. I don't know. But I did have a great relationship with Lex. Enjoyed traveling with him. Similar lifestyles, eat the same foods, same type of workout, type of thing, taking care of our bodies. And whether I was wrestling against him or wrestling with him, we worked well together, had a great professional attitude towards each other. And so I felt we worked real well together in the ring. As far as Lex's attitude, again, there's going to be varied opinions. Someone said on a radio call-in that it sounded like they were saying about me that, well, I was only in it for the money, because I was sharing with them. I retired at the age of 33 because I set a goal. I set a goal when I broke into the wrestling business that I would be retired by the time I was 35. I would walk away on top of the game, leaving people wanting more than saying, when is Nikita going to hang it up? And I quickly share with them, look, not unlike any other business venture that somebody may get into, hopefully you set goals, and if you start a business, you don't start it to lose money, you start it to make money. And so whatever you do, wrestling, you're in the business to make money. Some have a greater passion for the business than others. I look back on the wrestling business and I feel totally blessed and honored and flattered that I had the opportunity. I think when it's all said and done, Lex would probably say the same thing at some point in time. He would look back on it and would be grateful that he had the opportunity to wrestle.
Since we're talking about the longevity of careers and stuff like that, are you surprised about Ric Flair's run in the business? I mean, do you think that he's just hanging on, or do you think that Ric Flair should have retired a long time ago and save his name?
Well, I'll address both. Two things. One, no, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised with Rick. I have the utmost respect for Rick. Rick, I'll go on record saying too, was tremendously. I've got a lot of people to give credit to for the career of Nikita Koloff. Rick is certainly one of them. Was instrumental in making me who I was, and I always respected Rick for his psychology of the business, for his professionalism, his love for the business, his passion for the business. It doesn't surprise me a bit. And as I come to know some of the other old timers in the business, Mr. Wrestling Tim Woods and Abe Jacobs and Sweet Hansen, playing a lot of charity golf tournaments, celebrity golf tournaments with these guys now, and getting to know some of those guys, Rene Goulet. It really wasn't uncommon in the old days, in the old school, for these guys to wrestle into their 40s, 50s. I mean, Lou Thesz wrestled in 7 decades. 7 decades. Now, the difference, though, that I see with Lou Thesz and Rick is Lou preserved his career by, even though he wrestled in 7 decades, he was champion. He was treated as a champion. He wasn't beat by every Tom, Dick, and Harry, if you will. That's the only thing I would say with Rick. And Rick's just doing what he feels he needs to do, I guess. Would have been to perhaps consider, how do I bow out of this gracefully?
And I guess at the time you also brought in Vladimir Pietrov.
Yeah, to eliminate the traitor Nikita Koloff, who turned down the motherland. How could you do this to me, Nikita? You turned down the motherland. How could you do this? I was such a wonderful guy. He is, and I think back to some of those matches. We didn't have a tremendous amount of. I mean, Ric Flair, I had hundreds of matches against. Ivan, I had a handful of matches against. But again, being the great worker he is, I just followed his lead, man. I just whatever he said to do, it was, yes, sir. I'll be glad to do it, and just wanted to go out of my way to because he had such a phenomenal career in the wrestling business. I just wanted to go out of my way to heighten that in any way I could myself. So there isn't any one particular match or anything that sticks out with my matches with Ivan. Just the overall picture. It was a great time.
When Vladimir came in, I guess he was only there for a short run. He ran into some legal problems, correct? I think.
Yeah, I don't know the whole story on that. Again, and that goes back because I've been a private person for the most part, and not delving in other people's lives.
Right.
I just kind of stay out of their personal lives, and in fact, it's humorous in one sense because a lot of guys have some use stage names, some use their real name, and there would be times in the past somebody would mention to me somebody's name. I'm like, who? And then I'd meet the guy and go, oh, you're talking about him. Yeah, because I had no idea. I just had no idea. It wasn't in my makeup. I figured, that's just the way I am. It's just my makeup.
Right. Whose idea was it for you to grow your hair in when you came back?
Oh, that was a tangent that I went on, I guess. I couldn't even tell you why I did it. I just thought, I'm going to come out, I'm going to do something different, man. I'm going to come back in. And, hindsight being 2020, I look back on it. If I had to do it all over again, would I have done that? No. I would have come back with a shaved head.
Do you think it might have killed the momentum as far as, the gimmick?
No, I don't think so. I'll tell you what, if anything, what might have deterred that more than anything would have been the attitude of the promotion. There was a different treatment when I came back. Simply, I believe in my heart anyway, because I didn't put wrestling number one, because it wasn't the top thing in my life. And all the time that was poured into me and to build the Nikita Koloff character, that there was just a whole different attitude, a different sense with what they were going to do with my career once I came back.
I guess when you first left, you did some shots for Vern Gagne?
Well, no, that was actually after I had kind of fog in that whole part in time there. Again, you have to understand, my wife is dying of cancer, and so get a little fog in on what the chronology of what happened when. But I did a few shots for Vern just to kind of help him out, mainly TV tapings, television tapings, a couple house shows,
right?
But just to kind of and Vern was actually working with Jim Crockett too, and they were trying to get together the TWN, the Wrestling Network. And so AWA, NWA, in fact, the Road Warriors were the AWA tag team champs, and they were coming in and doing some shots for Jim, and Jim was sending some guys. Like I remember working a show with Larry Zbyszko for Vern, and Ric Flair was on the card as one of the main events, co-main event as the NWA heavyweight champion, and I was wrestling against Larry. I think Larry at the time was the AWA heavyweight champion, if I remember right.
Right. I'm thinking about like the late 80s. I know that was earlier on when they did the joint shows. Didn't you work AWA a couple of times after that?
Yeah, well, there was a stint in there where I did some.
I think it was a couple TVs. That's all it was.
Yeah, just a couple things, some independent things.
Right.
And again, it was just to really help Vern out.
Right. What was Vern like as a booker compared to Dusty Rhodes?
Well, it was only a few shots, so it would be hard to give a good analysis or a good comparison. The thing I remember most about Vern, which comes to mind to me, is hilarious, is how something would happen and he'd get upset or something, and he'd always go, jeez, jeez. He picks him always hitting his head, saying, jeez. And but I enjoyed the few shots I worked for Vern. He was very cordial to me and treated me right. And
right.
I enjoyed it.
How'd you wind back in WCW?
Essentially, in one sense, as a favor. It wasn't long after my wife had passed away that the phone started ringing, and asking, will you come back? Will you come back? In fact, I don't know how much public knowledge this will be, but it will be. I'm in the process of writing an autobiography, and this story will certainly be in there. But I was offered the world heavyweight title if I would come back, and I turned it down. And again, many guys would have leaped at an opportunity like that, but I turned it down because I just personally wasn't ready to jump back in on the schedule they wanted me to. I mean, they were basically full time, 25, 30 days a month. They wanted me to come back, and not too many people know that, but they were willing to put. Rick was willing to drop the world strap and put it on my waist if I would have came back sooner than I did. When I eventually came back, for the most part, I did it because of my relationship with Dusty, and came into the territory and worked out a 6-month contract, which was my choosing. I wanted to work a 6-month contract, and just to see what would happen.
How are things different when you came back?
Well, they want to bring me back as a heel. And I tried to convince them I didn't believe it would work because the angle, again, with the superpowers and with Magnum, got over so strong. In fact, a good friend of mine, Bill Apter, who was the senior editor with Pro Wrestling Illustrated at the time, did a cover shot. And just the whole cover was just my head. They said, "I cry a tear for Magnum TA." And that so emotionally grabbed people and so ingrained them into the Nikita Koloff character that I tried to tell them. I said, I don't think they wanted me to come back against Luger, who was one of the top baby faces in the territory at the time. He was the U.S. champion, and the angle would be that I was going to present him with a brand new belt that they had just made, and we were down in Phoenix, Arizona, for one of the live shows. And, I presented to him and whacked him over the head with it, and half the crowd cheered. I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is their good, this is one of their baby faces. And then for the next few months, every time we go in, half the crowd would be for him, half the crowd would be for me. And I kept trying to tell him, I said, look, I'm trying to tell you guys, the heel thing's not going to get it. He's too strong as a baby face. So he said, well, here, then they came up with the idea, well, we'll put you against Sting, because Sting's the next top baby face. So then we did the angle. Luger and Sting were in a tag match in Pensacola or St. Pete, Florida. Another live big show. So it was Luger and Sting against the Steiners in a tag. And the deal was I charged the ring with my chain and to nail Luger, and he would duck, and I'd accidentally hit Sting, and they'd lose the match, and then Luger tell him afterwards what had happened, and Sting tear in the back and look for me and found me, and we're fighting out in the parking lot, and that'll do it. Well, a little bit better, but I still had a fan following, even though more were cheering. Maybe it was 75-25, 75 cheering for Sting, 25 for me, and so I couldn't convince them otherwise. And so the 6 months came up, and I couldn't work out an agreement with Jim Hurd, who was running the operation at the time. And so when the 6 months was up, I went into another sabbatical, if you will.
Right.
Early retirement, in a sense.
Did you like being a heel again, or did you? When you worked, would you rather be a babyface, or would you rather be a heel?
Well, the time I was a heel when I first broke into the business was phenomenal. I didn't know anything different, and I really enjoyed it. When I made the turn and became a babyface, in a parallel sense, that was phenomenal. Which did I enjoy more? I enjoyed them both in different ways.
Right.
I guess I'd have to say, though, when I came back as a heel, it was hard to try and get in that psychology of, even though I knew the business and I could work the business from a heel standpoint, psychologically or mentally, it was challenging to maintain that role, especially in and out of the ring, like I did when I first broke in the business. It was much easier to carry the babyface role, and at that point in my life, I preferred the babyface role versus the heel.
Right. I don't know why I forgot about this question, but what are your memories of the very first War Games in Florida?
Atlanta.
The first one was in
the Omni.
Yeah, okay.
The Omni in Atlanta. A very physical match. Of course, if you would talk to Arn Anderson, he said, I got paid to do nothing, but simply because he's always the first one in the ring and he'd be in there for 25 minutes, and I'd come in for 5 minutes is why he would say that. But, even that, 5, 10, 15 minutes, however long it was I was in the ring, a very physical match. And I tell you, the first ones were very exciting. People had never seen anything like it before, and just the build up to what was going to happen, the anticipation, who was going to win, would they get played? Because everyone kind of figured, it's either going to be J.J. Dillon or Paul Ellering, who would one way or another give up. It was pretty cool. I enjoyed the War Games. And I have a lot of respect for Arn, who would start it off and go the entire 30-plus minutes. It was pretty grueling.
Hawk and Animal said on their interview, since Hawk was like the last guy in there and everybody made the big comeback,
Right.
said Hawk had he like pressed Tully into the cage and he was doing like all this new stuff, and he said everybody was dying laughing in there because he was so excited, he like hurt everybody. He was like the first 30 seconds because he was so fired up from it.
Oh yeah, the Horsemen were horrified every time. When they heard that final bell ring, yeah, they were horrified. They're like, oh, please tell me it's going to be over any time now. But that's just the way Hawk was. He would get excited like that, and there were some of the guys in the business who were like that. They would kind of with reckless abandon is the best way I could put it. They would enter the ring, but the War Games was phenomenal.
When you finally came back to WCW again, Bill Watts was booker, I guess.
Right.
What was you already gave your opinion of Bill Watts, what you saw him do to some of his guys in his locker room. How is he as far as your boss now?
Well, interesting because what had happened was, we renegotiated a new contract, and so here I came back in, and as a babyface, and the angle would be that I would come back in, and how we're going to get that over is came back in apologizing to Sting. In fact, we did a thing in Atlanta. My daughter was only 7 years old at the time. We painted up her face and brought my daughter in the ring as a little Stinger, and publicly apologized to Sting for what had happened in the past, and so that was going to start the new babyface angle for us. And so I was actually in the territory working for a while, about 2 months or so, when Bill came in. And it's quite humorous, really, in a sense, because first night Bill came to me and he said, Nikita, he said, man, you haven't got paid since you've been here. I said, yeah, I know. And what had happened was we came to a verbal agreement on the contract. And I figured Ted Turner, corporate America, I'm not going to be too worried about it. We had our agreement, when they get the contract finished, they'll get it finished. I'm keeping track of all the days I'm working, so I know what they owe me. And I said, yeah, I know, Bill. He said, yeah, but they owe you like thousands of dollars. I said, well, I figured Ted's good for it. And I was just, and I was being serious with him. He said, man, I wish I would have had you when I had the Louisiana territory. Had that kind of an attitude. I just say, Bill, it's Ted Turner. We've got an agreement. He said, well, I'll see that contract gets taken care of. And I said, well, that's fine. I pulled Bill aside. I said, and I did this because of what I said earlier, knowing how Bill was in that Louisiana territory. And even though this was kind of a different role for him, he didn't own the territory, so I figured there'd be a little different attitude on his part. I pulled him aside in a very respectful, cordial way. I said, Bill, I need to share something with you, just right up front, right from the start. You're new, you're my new boss, but here's the deal. I said, I'm here as a favor to somebody. I don't need this business. So don't get me wrong. I said, I enjoy it, but I don't need it. I can do other things. Bill, I've got a college degree. I own several health clubs. I've got a diversified investment portfolio. So in a respectful way, I was saying, Bill, please don't treat me like you. I've seen you treat a lot of these other guys in the past, because I won't put up with it. I'll walk. I'll be gone. And I wasn't trying to be a prima donna or anything, because anyone will tell you that when I stepped in the ring, any fan I think would tell you that when they left the building that night, if I was on the card, they know they got 110% effort from Nikita Koloff. That was one of my things, one of my goals. They were going to get their money's worth. If I don't care who else they would talk about Nikita Koloff, they'd have to say we got 110% effort. We got our money's worth with Nikita Koloff. And so, I told him, and many of the boys would say, many of the boys said to me, in fact, they said, they said, Nikita, this is all I know how to do. And I look at them and I tell them, I say, you know what? Life's too short. There is life after wrestling. No, you don't understand. This is all I know. So I said, well, I can do other things, and so can you. And I hope one day you'll change that attitude. So what I was really just saying to Bill was, let's keep it on an even keel, Bill. And I think I gained his respect that day, and not one time in the territory. And in fact, I remember, again, Philadelphia seems to be coming back into play here. But I was in a town. We were in Philadelphia, and we were in the building, and a couple guys had a tag match. I'm not going to name their names, but he was in the room with them, and I was on the third floor, and they were on the first floor, and he talked to them like they were dogs. And I remember saying, if he ever talks to me that way, I'm out of here. And he never did. And I respect Bill. I respect Bill. I respect him for what he did. He did not have an easy job. And even when he owned the territory, I can understand the pressures that were there. But I think I gained a great respect for him.
Do you think he was in over his head when he was with WCW? Well, we did an interview with him. He said that, basically his hands are tied with a lot of aspects of the company, and it was a lot of corporate things. Ole Anderson was against him, so to speak.
Sure. And anybody in that position, whether it was Dusty Rhodes, Bill Watts, I don't care who it was for the most part in that era anyway, when I was there, best way I could say it is they were a puppet.
Right.
They gave the impression that they were, running the organization. But the truth be known, they were not running the organization. They were just a front man, if you will, or let me even say a fall guy. Because if it didn't work, then you could point the finger at Bill or at Dusty. Hey, if it did work, well, okay, maybe they got some credit, but the front office, would ultimately get the credit for it. And so he's right. Yeah, his hands were tied. In fact, in my personal relationship with Dusty, as he was the booker, he oftentimes would say to me, Nikita, my hands are tied on this thing. He said, Nikita, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, to go from booking for Jim Crockett, where Dusty pretty much did run the show, to booking for Ted Turner, to where they had the corporate office, Dusty said, I can't even leave my office and walk into the next office next door and make a comment to anybody. I have to put it on paper and send a memo to the office next door if I want to say something. Everything has to be written down on paper. That's a pretty challenging job.
How did the boys feel towards Bill Watts? I've heard a lot of horror stories, and I've heard him and Scott Steiner almost went at it a couple times.
Yeah, and again, I have to reemphasize, I pretty much kept private to myself overall, although, it's hard not to pick up on things or hear things and different things. Yeah, there were some of the guys that I vaguely remember the incident you're talking about when Scott Steiner really got into it with them, and they were in some great shouting matches. And that was just kind of Bill Watts' style. That's just how he conducted himself. And so he did rub a lot of guys the wrong way. Overall, I just say, I have to say that was Bill.
Right. Was there a lot of resentment towards, Bill for pushing his son, Eric Watts? Yeah, I remember reading a lot of sheets and stuff like that, and a lot of guys would tell me that, he pushed his son really unfairly, Eric.
Well, what father's not gonna?
Right.
Really, I mean, you think about it. I mean, Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair, David Flair. I mean, who's not? It's family. Who's not going to push their son? I hold nothing against Bill for pushing Eric. Did Eric really have what it took to be a Ric Flair? Maybe not, probably not. But the fact that Bill was his father, I'm not taking nothing away from Eric. I'm not taking nothing away from Bill, because I think anybody in the same situation realistically would have done the same thing.
What do you think is WCW's biggest problems as far as, not being able to keep the same management for a long period of time? And, right now the company's in turmoil. It's been in turmoil for months. Actually, years, actually.
Well, yeah, it's like since 1988 when they bought it.
Right.
Exactly. Because I want to tell you, when I was there in 90, 91, 92, brother, I would scratch my head. I'm like, there would be, they would book a card. And by the time the matches began, not one match in the card would be the advertised match. And the strangest part for me was some of the guys, like maybe it was Arn Anderson against Terry Taylor, let's just say, that was advertised. But the match would be Arn Anderson against Billy Joe Bob and Terry Taylor against Billy Ray. The point being, Terry and Arn were both in the building, but they were working different matches, even though they were advertised against each other. I'm like, what's up with that? I don't get it. It just made absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. And what at least initially when I was there, I think the major problem was, when you got pizza guys who run pizza joints trying to run a wrestling business, who really knew nothing about running a wrestling business. See, when the Crockett family owned it, they ran it they owned it for 55 years.
Right.
They knew how to run a wrestling business. Vince McMahon's father knew how to run a wrestling business, and Vince McMahon learned how to run a wrestling business. You don't go from running a baseball team and having a television network. What it is, it's just another thing in the portfolio. So it's not the central focus. It's not the main thing. So, you just try to put together what you can to get the operation running. And because of that, it's never really flowed.
Right. What are your impressions of Eric Bischoff?
I don't know. I don't know Eric that well. I knew him, met him when I went up to make some shots in the AWA for Vern.
Right.
Got along well with. From the time I was around him, I had a great rapport with Eric, and liked Eric from the time I was around him. I hear different things here and there, but I can't say a bad word against him personally in the times that I professionally have been around him.
Right. When you finally left WCW, what prompted your decision to leave?
Well, of course, my last match, I did get an injury that particular night. It was a series of reasons. It wasn't any one particular reason. I know, Van Vader was able to play off that tremendously, saying he ended the career of Nikita Koloff, put me out of professional wrestling. I did get injured that night against him, injured my neck. Sometimes he would get a bit radical in matches. Another guy who I don't think he knew his own strength. We're wrestling out on the floor and took about a 10-yard run and clotheslined me to the back of the head. And my left arm went limp for about 4 minutes. I had absolutely no control over it, just kind of hanging there. Eventually, it would start to come back a little bit, the feeling in my fingers and stuff. And, I could start to maneuver my arm. And I reported that injury. Then the next morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and I'm feeling a little strange in my lower abdomen. Come to find out I had a hernia from picking up the 500-pound behemoth. And so I had to have a hernia operation. So I had that. And I was rehabilitating my neck. And in those couple months there, it wasn't like I hadn't sat home before. And each time I sat home and each time I went back, it got to be a little harder to go back. In fact, I got married to my current wife, Victoria, in 1990, and her 2 children, Taryn and Tawny. They were 7 and 4 at the time. So I had a family started now. Prior to that, I was single. So each time I started going back, I'm leaving the family now. Before it was just me, no big deal. Sleep in my apartment, sleep in a hotel room. What's the big deal? And then we had our first child in 1992, Kendra. And also now I have my first child. Now I'm leaving my baby in addition to leaving my family. So I've got that as a factor. I've got the injuries as a factor. I've got my goal that I established in 1984 when I broke in to be retired by the time I'm 35. I'm 33 at the time. And so I got that as a factor. The travel, the more I traveled, that was a factor. The fact that corporate America stepped in. I always remember, many will probably remember, there's an old movie called North Dallas 40. And there was a scene I'll never forget in that movie. It was in the locker room. And it was the little short coach that drank all the Maalox all the time. And I think it was John Matuzak, I think was the scene. And they were having a heated discussion. And Matuzak was saying to the coach, he's saying, every time we call this a game, you call it a business. And every time we treat it as a business, you call it a game. Would you get the story straight? And that was my impression when Turner bought the business, was we try to have fun and they go, hey, this is a business here, and they'd slap a fine on us for something. And then we get serious and treat us as a business. I go, hey, you guys got to loosen up, man. It's just a game, you know. Relax. And that was my feel. I'll never forget that. And so I'm looking at that. I'm looking at, and quite frankly, they tried to make it miserable for me because they wanted all of us to move to Atlanta. Myself and Rick and Arn and Bobby Eaton, Rick Steamboat and Jimmy Garvin. There were several of us that liked Charlotte, and we decided to stay in Charlotte. And one of the things they did with me is they said, well, okay, you want to stay in Charlotte, that's fine. And when they'd mail me all my tickets to fly somewhere,
to drive.
No, well, they'd be out of Atlanta. So they'd want me to drive from Charlotte to Atlanta to make my connections. You know what the irony to all of it is? I take the tickets they'd issue me. I became my own traveling agent. I literally, and I can't tell you how many times I said, look, I can save you money. This ticket you gave me is $450. I checked. I can fly from Charlotte to Cincinnati and back for $275. Do you still want to pay the $450? That's the way we're doing it. So you know what I did? I took the tickets, rebook it. I get $125 back. I'm dead serious. You know, I literally had, it was somewhere between $3,000 and $4,000. I made money from the tickets. I'm saying I did. They probably don't know that, but I did, and I rebooked all my flights and stuff. But that's the kind of games they were playing. When I said hey, it's a business. No, it's a game. No, it's a game. No, it's a business. That's the kind of things they were doing. And I'm like, this is unnecessary. It doesn't have to be this way. So the atmosphere really started changing as corporate America stepped in, and so there were multiple reasons why I retired. It wasn't that I was injured and was put out of wrestling. In fact, the doctor said, my neck, I saw everyone from a chiropractor to having MRIs done on my neck. Now, I will go on record and say this. They said, you're 33 years old, you've got the neck of a 55-year-old man because of the suplexes and pile drivers and whatnot. You've got bone spurring in your lower neck. You've got some deterioration going on there. Are we saying don't ever wrestle again? No. Are we saying that the longer you wrestle, the higher risk you take of even a permanent injury like paralysis or something? Yes. And so I started thinking about my kids. And I thought, I'm going to be, I'm 33. Yeah, I could wrestle another 5-6 years. But what if I get so crippled that when I'm in my 40s, I can't even do things with my kids? And so I started thinking about all those things. And I just made a determination. I said, you know what? I'm going to retire. And I had several years left on the contract, and basically informed them what my intentions were doing. And true to form, on this radio show I did recently, one of the fans called in and said, man, you just disappeared. I said, yeah, they're kind of infamous for that, aren't they? They could do some great things with that business if they just did like a Legends. In football, you got the Hall of Fame, right? Baseball, you got the Hall of Fame. I mean, they could do some really incredible things with wrestling. They had like a Hall of Fame of wrestling and the legends and put all this together. In fact, you know what, guys? You could probably make a lot of money if you did that.
Right. Well, they did the Slamboree pay-per-views, but I don't think it was the same. I don't know if you're familiar with that, the Legend pay-per-views.
Well, I heard a little bit about it, but not a lot.
Yeah. Do you ever have any desire to ever return?
That's a loaded question. I would say I wouldn't rule it out. I would go on record as saying recently they asked for a return. Not too many people know that.
WCW?
Yeah,
right.
WCW. But again, true to form, it was like 10 o'clock on Friday night, and they said, we need you in Buffalo, New York, Sunday morning. Right. Well, what about contracts? What about, what about money? And not that money's everything, but, well, never mind that. We just need you there, In the right situation, I would not rule it out if I thought there was some advantage. I would say it would have to be, it would be an advantage for them and for me. Where I'm at in the business world is, I'm not all about Nikita, so it doesn't have to all be for me and about me. I would want it to be as big an advantage for them as it was for me. Yes, I would want to make money, but I'd want to make them money with it too. And there's a couple ideas that I've come up with that I think would generate tremendous interest. And to this day, several years retired now, I still, and it amazes me, and I'm very flattered by it, I still get fan letters on a monthly basis, even today's day and time.
How would Nikita fare in today's business?
I think he'd do quite well. I think it would bring a new style to the wrestling business, a new style that the fans have been longing for. Some of the fans wouldn't be used to it, but I think there would be an adjustment period there. But I think I could do real well. I have kept myself in shape.
Do you still watch it?
Very little. Simply because I'm doing so many, wearing so many different hats, doing other things. I just catch a glimpse of it here and there and pick up on things. And although doors have been opening, like with a lot of, like I said, a lot of radio interview shows and different types of interviews and the webpage and internet, and so a lot of things are opening up. That there's possibilities there.
Right. How do you compare wrestling today compared to wrestling back in the 80s?
Apples and oranges. I summarize that by saying in those days it was wrestling with a flavor of entertainment, and now it's entertainment, and you may see some wrestling if you're really fortunate. Someone recently said, they said, you could watch from week to week, and you were inspired to watch from week to week because the storylines were built into the matches, where now the storylines aren't really aren't built into the matches, from what I understand. And you have to understand, I don't watch a whole lot of it, but they're built more around outside of the wrestling arena than they really are inside of the wrestling ring. And so to really draw the people into, we used to work months in a program. I worked with Rick for 7-8 months. We come to Greensboro, North Carolina, and have a World Heavyweight title match. Then we come to Greensboro and have a World Heavyweight title match with no disqualification. Then we come to Greensboro and have a world title match with no disqualification, no time limit. It was so the story was built and built and built. Just like the very first time when we did the dungeon scenes. I'd never even touched Ric Flair, but we did about 6 or 8 week series of dungeon scenes, and that built such a level of interest from the people that even though I had never even stepped in the ring with Flair, and even hitting David Crockett, I'd still really never even stepped in the ring with Flair. Prior to one little skirmish when I nailed Crockett, one little skirmish with Flair, but yet we did 30-something thousand people in the Coliseum that night. And could they get that style back?
Vince Russo recently said that he doesn't see titles meaning anything anymore because he thinks it's I guess he thinks it's a stupid idea to have a guy to hold the belt for a long period of time, because he says it's not it's not real.
Well, and you know what? That just fits in with where they're at in today's day and time. And in fact, he's right. The titles do mean nothing anymore. Absolutely nothing. There was a day and time when those titles meant everything. And the wrestling fan will tell you, especially the old school wrestler, the diehard. When I travel to places and speak, and I get the 30, 40, 50, 60-year-olds who share with me. And some of them, it's funny, they'll say, my mom and dad, or my grandpa, my grandma. Oh, man, they this, they that. The fact that, he lost the title. And it just, he's right. They mean nothing anymore. And it's, to me, it's sad in a sense, even though I wasn't in there for a long time, but having been raised up by old timers, old school wrestlers, it's a tragedy that they have diminished the belts to mean nothing.
Right. In the 80s, it was pretty much a big man sport. What are your views on steroids?
Well, I'm not an advocate of steroid use. I will say that they work.
Have you ever experienced them, experimented with them, or?
Back years ago in my college days, when I was playing football, aspiring to play in the National Football League, I will publicly say that although I feel fortunate that I never got sucked into the psychological aspect of it, to the old adage is more is better. If I take 2, 4 will produce twice the results of the 2, and I never got sucked into that psychology of it. and I was very moderate in the use of it, and recognized that the effects of it long term could be detrimental to my life and my health, and so I put an end to it. Those who say they don't work, really, I'd have to say don't know what they're talking about, because they really do. They are enhancement drugs without question. The problem is, like everything, it goes from use to abuse. And a good friend of mine, superstar Billy Graham, shows the effects of abuse. There are guys today that I know years from now are going to regret. I mean, Billy will tell you he regrets ever using steroids. He's had four hip replacements now. His bones are deteriorating to the point that he can barely physically get around. Was it all worth it? No, Billy will tell you no. No, it wasn't. The money wasn't, the fame wasn't, the fortune wasn't worth it. And there will be guys in today's era that one day will regrettably look back and think, what could I have been thinking? What was I doing?
Right. If you could have one last run or one last match, who would it be with?
Interesting question. I've never really gave that a tremendous amount of thought, and being essentially put on the spot and thinking about that. The first name that came to mind was Bret Hart, simply because he's a great worker, a great ring tactician. I've never been in the ring with him. I've always marveled at his work, been impressed with his work, and so I guess Bret Hart would be the answer at this point.
Right. Are you surprised about how open the business is now compared to back in the 80s when it was, pretty much closed door?
Not surprised by it, disappointed by it, yes, without question. And even the fans, it's funny that, the different feedback I get from fans, say, boy, we really liked it better back then. We liked it when it was like that, but when we really didn't know, or when we kind of thought we knew, but we really didn't know, and just the whole aspect of it. It's kind of like, somebody told me one time there was remember the old one of the original sitcoms, All in the Family,
right?
Archie Bunker, right? They were telling me, sharing with me that they did a spiff on there one time, and Archie was watching wrestling, and his son-in-law Meathead, right, walked in and said, Archie, what are you watching that stuff for? It's all fake, and Archie turned around and looked at him and he said, hey, Meathead. He said, shut up. He said, maybe they know what's going to happen, but I don't. So let me watch it, And it kind of summarizes a lot of the fans and how they felt, like there was a mystique to it. And I think they appreciated that. I believe anyway, from the feedback I get, that they appreciated that a lot more than what the expose that it has become.
Right. All right. One of the final questions before I finish up. If you could pick a couple of matches to basically remember your legacy, which ones would they be?
I would have to say the Great American Bash with Ric Flair in 1985. That would definitely be one. Best of 7 series with Magnum TA. Without question, those matches would I think, be part of the legacy that I would want to leave. I'd have to say you could pick any one of the matches with the Road Warriors. Those would be part of it. Beyond that, I mean, again, I've had some great matches. You could pick some of the Russian chain match I had with Sting. You could pick a match I had with Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard. I had some phenomenal guys that I had an opportunity to work with in my career, and so I would almost venture to say pick one match from most of those guys that I work with, compile them, and that would be the legacy that I would leave from wrestling.
What are you currently doing with yourself right now?
Well, I'm involved in a number of ventures. I mentioned I wear many different hats. Father is one of the hats I wear. I have 4 children, 4 girls, Taryn, Tawny, Kendra, and Colby. The oldest being 18, the youngest being 4 years of age currently.
Do they watch wrestling or no?
No. Actually they don't. And beautiful daughters. All 4 of them are just gorgeous daughters. Of course, you look at their mother and you'll know why. I homeschooled the 2 youngest ones. I actually have a college degree in teaching. Not too many people know that. And so I homeschool the two youngest. And in addition to that, I've I have numerous business ventures, a couple of which the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, and I have partnered up in venturing in an internet business that we collaborate on together. Another business venture, a good friend of mine, Sal Corrente, Afa, if you remember Afa, the Wild Samoan, he and I have partnered up, and we're in the process of getting The Rock and Rikish involved with us, as well as some of the other guys. Mr. Wrestling Tim Woods is involved with us, and we've got some other guys that are partnering up in another business venture that we are going to take advantage of. It's a very highly rated New York Stock Exchange company, and we're very pumped up about that. Some guys are making some good money, some serious money with it. So we've got those business ventures going on, and some know, some don't know, but I'm actually involved in moving into full-time evangelism, actually doing ministry now. In 1993, after I retired from the wrestling business, became a born-again Christian, and my whole family ministers with me. My wife sings, does music ministry, and they travel with us. I've traveled all over the world. In fact, it's interesting because wrestling took me all over the world and brought me to a lot of different cultures. The ministry has brought me to cultures I had not been. So far, I've been to Russia, my former motherland. That's right. What? You don't speak Russian or what? Come on. But I've ventured into Russia, Africa, South America, Singapore, the British West Indies. I've got future trips planned to India and other parts of Africa, and really all over the continent, Europe, England, for ministry. So I've experienced some phenomenal cultures and whatnot with the ministry now. Wrote my first book is out called Breaking the Chains. Excited about that, and I've got two other book projects I'm working on at the same time. The autobiography, which is yet untitled, although we have a couple ideas. Then we have another book that will be out that will be a business-related book because I'm also moving into the venue of motivational seminars. Going for companies and corporations and into schools, and I do motivational talks. And the book will be geared around business, and we have a title for that. A good friend of mine by the name of Jeffrey Gittimer, who is a national speaker for the motivational speaker and sales trainer. We've come up with a title called Predetermined Outcomes. How about that one, right? But essentially what it's going to be, the gist of it will be is in business, you can be as successful as you want to be in business if you'll just predetermine your outcome, and by doing a few essential things, whether it be setting goals or your attitude or different. So that's kind of the gist of what that book will be. And so we've got all those things going on, and so in fact, the guy asked me yesterday, he said, how do you wear so many different hats? How do you do it and keep it all together? And I simply, my answer to him was, by the grace of God, really is how I keep it all together. And so I'm thrilled. I've got a thriving marriage. I've got a thriving ministry. I've got a thriving business ventures with some of the old timers, some of the old boys working together. And in fact, one of the last things I'll share with you, Ted DiBiase and I have a wrestling outreach that we do. And we'll go into towns, into markets, and we'll bring the wrestling ring in. We've got our own crew on the West Coast and East Coast, and we'll go into a church setting. And it's interesting because Ted, we had parallel careers in wrestling. He was with the WWF, $1 Million Man, and I'm Russian Nightmare in the WCW. Now we have parallel careers going in ministry as well, and sometimes we hook up together, and we show people that every man really does have a price. And it's not money. So lots of things going on. I'm very excited, thrilled, and feel honored and privileged that you would take the time to do this interview with me today, and looking forward to the things in the future.
Definitely. Thank you very much. Do you have anything you want to say to your fans before we close? Or?
Yeah, you know what I like to say in closing? I like to say this to the fans. Over the years, you've been very loyal and very supportive of anything I've ever done. In fact, whether it's been in the wrestling venue and now in the ministry venue, time and time again, you bless my heart when you come up to me and you tell me what an impact and what a difference I've made in your life. One of the most flattering things that's happened recently is I was walking through a restaurant and through the service line, and the young gal had the name badge with Nikita on it. And I said, "That's an interesting name." And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Is that your real name?" She said, "Yeah, it is." I said, "Well, got to ask, why did your parents name you Nikita?" And she said, "Oh," she said, my mama was the biggest wrestling fan. She loved this professional wrestler named Nikita Koloff." And I said, "Really?" You got to understand, with the hair, right? Most people just don't put two and two together, right? And I said, "Really?" So I pulled out my driver's license. I handed it to her, and I said, "Read the name of that driver's license." And she's studying that license and studying it. And a few seconds later, she finally said, "Oh, if my mama was here, she'd go crazy. She'd go crazy." And, but it just made me think. I thought, and then since that time, I've had no less than a half a dozen people that I've either met or been told they named their children Nikita after me. And not only kids, but I'm talking dogs, cats, turtles. I got a guy who named his guitar Nikita. And, but it really got me thinking. I'm thinking, wow, what an impact I made on people's lives. I mean, for them to name their child after me, what an impact. And so to the fans of the world of Nikita Koloff, I would say thank you. Thank you for the support. Thank you for your loyalty. And anytime, if ever, we meet down the road at some time, even the guys that are in business with me now, I mean, I've had people who said, never would I have ever dreamed I could have locked arms and went in business with Nikita Koloff. And it's just been flattering for me that you would feel that way about me. And I would just say thank you. And I would say I look forward to someday maybe I'll be coming into your market and we'll get an opportunity to meet each other, shake hands, sign an autograph for you, whatever I can do to help you out, whether it's you hearing me come and speak in a business venue or in a church or wherever it is I am. Please be certain to come up, introduce yourself, and say hello, because I want to meet you no matter where you're at in the world, because I'm traveling worldwide now. And I just say in conclusion, God bless you and look forward to seeing you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.